You got me this journal.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I wanted to read one of the first entries. A quick hit of the quads and hams keeps the weakness away. I felt weak today. My lawn guy didn't communicate. My neighbor refused to clear some trees that blocked my view. And the realtor told me that I needed to drop the price of my house. I need that money. I needed something to tell me that I was strong. That in the end, my respect for my least developed body part was more important than my most developed self-absorption, my ego. Today, life showed me that I wasn't in charge, so I found strength in the only safe place available, the gym.
Whew. Nice.
Yeah?
That's beautiful.
So I remember that day, and there have been some like that. I mean, everyone has those days. And the question there is, why, where is that person's safe place? Where can they go in a controlled environment and attack the weakest thing about them in a safe way? For some people, it's a relationship. For some people, it's a physical location.
Right.
For some people, maybe it's a text. There's got to be a place where someone can go, and even in the midst of them failing, they still believe that they're winning. Right?
Yeah.
And I guess another question is, what happens when they don't have that place? And what does it take to develop that place? Is it organic? Is it something that people are just entitled to? Like you did sports.
Yeah, which was in my own way the safe haven.
You were comfortable with failing within that context.
Well, yeah, the game itself was a game of failure. Like if you failed 7 times out of 10, like you were doing pretty good, which is kind of weird to think about. Others would say you succeeded 30% of the time, and that's really cool.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting it's interesting what life teaches us about failure. For a long time, I had a definition that failure was a bad thing, and because of failure, I was not safe. So I couldn't find that safe place in the midst of failure. That was like some of my hard lessons learning growing up. When I started playing sports and I realized like, hey, I could fail. I could literally not get a hit this game and we win the league championship, which happened. And I'm like my best friend was a shortstop. He played amazing. Probably had like one of his best games of the year, and I didn't do anything, but we won.
Yeah.
And that was interesting thought about failure is like, I failed, it was okay, like there was an outcome that we were all going for that we achieved, but maybe it wasn't my result that produced it, maybe it was my morale with, so it's like we can kind of twist what failure looks like and means to us in a way that can be self-serving, that I think can provide a safe place. So for me it was sports, and like to your journal entry, to you is the gym. But it's like, what's that story that you tell yourself about what failure looks like?
Yeah. Going in and like literally tearing your leg muscles, what working out is.
Yeah.
And then knowing that there's going to be pain on the other side of that healing process is like a real visceral reminder of the other areas in my life that I failed. I failed in I've talked to you about this before, but I failed in some relationships, and that were largely, well, regardless of whose fault it was, I didn't take responsibility in those moments to tackle the hard conversations or to not harbor bitterness or resentment. And instead, those things kept me away from my safe space, because relationships are another safe space for me. It's what I do professionally, and I enjoy forming relationships with people and memories and bonds. But the gym is like my relationship with myself. And when I'm working on my legs, which is the least developed part of my body, it's something that's not easy to do, and it's not something I necessarily look forward to.
Yeah.
So I go in and I say, I want to fail in a way that I can control it, so that I still get something from this, but I also generate courage just to come in here. I mean, who likes leg day? I get there are some people that like leg day. But
There's a gym I went to. They had a parking spot for people specifically doing leg day.
just leg day?
It was at the front of the gym.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of universal.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about legs that, I guess because they're not a, no, it's not that it's not a,
It's
it
just-
hurts. It hurts more.
It's taxing to your
Overall system.
yeah, itself, and like it produces most of the time for me, like I feel ill, you know,
It's,
like
it's
cardiovascular.
yeah, your cardiovascular system has to be. So people are weak in their legs usually because their cardiovascular system they're tired.
Right.
Not necessarily because the muscles in your legs are incredibly strong. It's not because the muscles are always weak. It's because your heart is weak. Oh man, there's something there, isn't it? It's not because your ability to be resilient is weak. It's because your heart is weak. It's because your soul is weak. It's because you haven't given yourself the grace necessary in the midst of failure to increase your heart, the strength of your heart muscles. And if your heart muscles aren't strong, then your physical muscles won't be.
Interesting.
So you go into the gym thinking you're developing your physical muscles, but really you're developing your willpower. You're developing your focus.
Yeah.
You're developing all the things you need to get through those instances I read about.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, it's one of the things I made a distinction on. You spoke is that the gym is a place for you to fail, but also feel in control. So outside of that, because I was thinking failure isn't necessarily one-to-one, gym versus relationship. Maybe in a relationship you may feel out of control,
Right.
and that can cause the chaos, confusion, the doubt per se. But in the gym context, you're like, oh, I'm going in here to controlled fail, so I'm in control.
Controlled fail. Kind of like the concentric or the eccentric motion in a rep.
Yeah.
That you can control the speed with which you squat and how quickly you explode up, or vice versa. So there is a bit of control there that requires patience. So you said it's not always a one-to-one, the gym and a relationship, sometimes in a relationship because it involves others, it can be a bit more chaotic, but in a gym you can kind of control that because it's just you.
Yeah.
But the irony there is that how many times do you see people in a gym just repping it out? They're more worried about getting their 10 or 12 or whatever reps they've pre-designated in their mind. They're really not going to failure, are they?
No.
They're
Usually
really
about
not.
40% of what they can actually do.
Right. They hit their 12. They say, I've fulfilled the rep range. I'm done. And they could have eked out 3 or 4 more, right?
Yeah.
It's to them, it's more about the specifics than it is about the ideology or about the philosophy of exercise.
Right.
Because when I go into the gym, if I'm doing legs especially, right, I try and go as quick as I can between them because I want to fatigue my muscles, and I'm in pretty good cardiovascular shape, so I can do that. But I really want to fatigue my hams. I really want to fatigue my quads and my calves. I really want to fatigue that as fast as possible. But I want to do it in a controlled way. Man, why do I want the control? Maybe because I haven't been feeling the control in other areas of my life.
And maybe that's not a bad thing. Like, it's not a problem to have that. It's at least you have a space, right? Imagine if you didn't feel control in any environment or any area of your life, the amount of chaos and confusion, you just kind of start living in it, and then you don't really, it becomes white noise to you, the chaos and confusion, and then you don't think anything other than it's chaos and confusion, and that perpetuates you staying in it. But with a controlled failure environment, maybe with yourself, like, oh, I know that I can, reconcile this failure with myself. That is like, that's your foundation, your bedrock of failure. Because now you can translate, well, I failed in the gym today. Like, I know this relationship may not be going, it's a little chaotic, I'm a little triggered here, but it's okay. I have this deeper level understanding because well, I fail over here all the time.
Right.
So I kind of understand it to some degree.
Yeah.
Like you're familiar with it.
So for people that don't have a safe space to go to, like that person they can talk to that they know will listen more than they talk and so forth, maybe it's a relationship that's chaotic for them and they don't have a safe space to go to and they're trying to stumble their way through this thing, and it's not working out. I wonder how can they apply some of the principles that are used in a workout, like controlling the motion, controlling the pace, the tone, the repetition, the intensity. How can they control those aspects of a physical workout and translate them into a relationship workout? Controlling the intensity of the topics. Maybe you don't always have to talk about the most pressing thing.
Right.
Maybe controlling the repetition. Maybe you don't always need to be revisiting the same topic. Maybe controlling the motion. So maybe the relationship or the conversation doesn't always have to divulge into past pains and hurts. Okay, so you're going to control the direction that it's going and the speed with which it goes there. That might help people have better control over the chaos in their interpersonal relationships, even if it's failing, because not all relationships are going to work out. But there's so much you can learn in the process of it failing that maybe you can take to the next workout, or ergo the next relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that the workout in and of itself is with you, right? Like you're the one that is in the motion, taking the action.
Yeah.
So where I think people can go in a different direction with it is they put something out onto someone else and say, they're in control, instead of I'm in control. I choose the movement. I choose how fast the pace is. I choose what body part I'm exercising. The self reflection, the looking inside, I believe is the path, and that can show up in a variety of forms. The gym is this specific case, but I mean, like I believe religious texts, a lot of them are teaching to be enlightened yourself, and that comes from the self-reflection, and like studying and understanding who you are, and not being. If we're not authentic, it changes the energy in which we approach things. Right?
Yes.
We got more of a mental load to carry around with us, right?
Authenticity when you go into the gym, man, that's rare. I mean, if you look at a lot of social media influencers, it's always about, even diet fads, it's always about looking better, attracting more. And yeah, maybe there's like a organic component to that. I mean, who doesn't want to look better, right?
Right.
But if you're not going in an authentic way to improve your spiritual core, to learn lessons from the physical motion itself, if you don't leave your ego at the door, essentially, then people who have a hard time with self-confidence aren't going to show up. But what happens if they start to learn that you can show up to develop the self-confidence, that it's not really about how you look? Certainly there are going to be some people that are better looking than not, maybe more developed bodies than not, however that looks like, I suppose, whatever. There's the classic types, I suppose. But really, working out and developing your spiritual core, developing your soul in a physical way, in a relational way, includes having, I keep on coming back to courage, but it includes having authenticity about why you're there. Not just to get people to look at you.
Yeah.
It's not just about that.
What comes to my mind is philosophy.
Always.
Yeah, always.
Always philosophy.
We have, society has adopted Rene Descartes' philosophy, which is I think, therefore I am, which kind of, what we end up doing is we end up casting an expectation out onto something prior to experiencing it. So we attach an identity to that, and we may never experience it. But the modern day philosophy, this gentleman's name is Martin Heidegger. His whole philosophy is being in the world. So it's like, I don't know what is going to happen until I'm in it, right? Like showing up to the gym, I don't know how to develop my confidence, but I'm going to show up to the gym and I'm going to work on it.
Kind of like Hegel talks about how experiencing something directly.
Yes. And until we're in it, we don't know what it's like. But what most people do is they abide by this philosophy of like, well, I'll just cast a judgment based on my past experience of what it's like, instead of being in it and understanding that it's fluid, things are changing, and like I can learn and develop. People often jump right to the end result in the beginning and say like, I want this now.
Self-limiting ideas, beliefs.
Yeah, and that goes back to the fundamental philosophy that we all are indoctrinated with.
You know, one thing I've really thought heavily about is how today's failures were yesterday's successes.
Yeah.
And that if I had done exactly that, if I had cast an expectation onto an experience that I'd never really had and had refused to go and engage that directly, then I would continue to think that failure or success only looked one certain way instead of being fluid.
Yeah.
And either putting myself in a position where I am succeeding through failing or learning the skills necessary to prepare myself to succeed in the next relationship or to, right the ship in this current relationship. But one thing I ask people a lot is, do you think you know things today that you didn't 5 years ago? And inevitably they say yes. Therefore, don't you think you'll know things 5 years from now that you don't know today? And how are you going to know those things?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to what you were saying. How do we know what we know? We can talk about that at another time, I suppose.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But really, the idea there is to inspire some courage, for them to be authentic with themselves, to be willing to take on new activities, even if they fear the failure. And so I guess kind of to come full circle, like with the whole leg day thing, going there and feeling the visceral pain of your muscles shearing, and then knowing that for the next couple of days you're going to be sore, gives you a physical reminder that not everything in life is going to play out in the way that we want it to with the expectations we set on it, right? I expected this person to be reasonable and to let me clear these trees so my view could improve. I expected people to show up on time, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And if I take those instances and I project them on others, then I'm just going to be limiting my ability to be authentic in the future. I'm not going to let a situation speak for itself. I'll be tainting it with prior bad experiences. That's why people don't get into new relationships. They get divorced, they say I'm done.
Yeah.
They taint their future ones because of past bad relationships.
Yeah. I would say that has a lot of application just in life in general. It's like being black and white about things based on our knowledge. So defining what success or failure looks like. It's like if I have a goal, let's say I want to run a big company, success or failure looks like if I'm not running a big company, then I'm failing. Success is when I am running that.
Right.
What's not taken into account is what's required to do that.
Right.
And that's being in it, is understanding what it takes to build and run, let's say, a company. And so when we cast those judgments or expectations on success or failure and not understanding that we have to fail our way to that point, well, we'll take ourselves out before we even get started. And that was something that, like, in my family, that's what I deal with, is I constantly have to be reminded that it's in the unknown that we work through things and we find out what success or failure really is, and that if it's a failure, that's okay, it's a learning lesson, not this bad thing that, oh, if I fail, like, everyone's going to go against me, or I'm not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
It's like, not really.
Yeah.
People really don't care.
What was it that was happening earlier? I was having a bad day. What was it? And you said that nobody really paid attention to it or knew that.
Yeah. It's like we some things that we feel like people be very judgmental to us about.
Oh yeah.
They really don't care because they're in their own situation.
Right.
Like they have things going on too.
Yeah. We get so kind of self-absorbed by our own flaws, and we realize that no one else is either aware of them or could care about them because they're kind of self-absorbed in their own
Right.
their own issues.
And most people are.
Yeah, of course.
And it's so interesting. We put a heavy weight on it, and we say, this means so much to me, how I appear or how I show up to someone else, when in reality, like, those people that we're showing up for, they're not like, yeah, he was off today. I'm gonna have to judge him for that one.
So if we're trying to socially connect on the wrong level, then we're really just ending up being more isolated.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to socially connect with others because I'm perfect enough for them to accept me, then really I'm just isolating myself more from them. And in response, if the other person is self-absorbed with their own troubles for the same reason, then they're not really looking at my effort to connect with them anyway, perhaps for good because it's, ill-motivated. But if we're going to connect with others, it needs to be with healthy, shared values that are going to move the relationship forward, not in an effort to present ourselves in an unreasonable way. Because
Yeah.
we're all flawed. We're all flawed.
And I think it's, since we're all flawed, maybe we take a different approach. Instead of trying to be perfect, we maybe try to be curious, like just a different mental switch. Instead of saying, oh, I fear failure in this situation because I don't feel perfect, it's, well, let me be curious about what I can discover in this situation. Like, I had a conversation yesterday with a guy, sat down with him, and he immediately, super successful, he immediately starts questioning me, like, what's your process? How do you do things? And I tell him, he's like, no, what's your biggest problem with that? Like, what's the breakdown there? I'm like, oh, well, we're talking about property management. He's like, I was telling him, like, leasing is my biggest issue. And he's like, okay, well, how do you do that now? Like, why is that an issue? Where's it breaking down? And I'm like, this guy, he could, like, have just said hey to me and kept going, but he pulled me into a conference room, sat down, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about what you do. And I'm like, this guy's like, 50s.
Yeah.
He's made his money, he's done his thing. He doesn't have to be curious.
Yeah.
He could be in that I'm perfect enough, I've done all these things, blah, blah. But instead he's like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What's the breakdown there? How are you solving for that? So I see that as the curiosity being vital versus the perfection to take action.
Yeah. That's helpful, man. I got to remind myself to be more curious.
Me too. And his curiosity, like, he really sparked in me, like, man, I could be more curious, Like, ask, maybe say, hey, that was really interesting what you did there. Why did you do that? Like, what was your intent?
Well, I appreciate the talk. Yeah, I think
it's
that's
good.
probably a big takeaway for me is, in addition to having a safe space, I'm learning to increase my curiosity about why I cast expectations off on those situations and it didn't fulfill it. At least I had a place to go to kind of challenge myself, and to get a small win for the day.
Yeah. For me, it was the having that controlled failure is a safe haven in a life that's full of perceived failure, of things not going our way, right? The expectations not being met, let's say. But having that safe place and knowing that it's okay, that things aren't going your way, that we keep moving on, life keeps going on.